everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Butterfly Soldiers. I'm your host, S. Rufaro, and we're back with segment 3 of our healing series with my girl, Hilda.
Hey.
Guys, we don't know how long we're going to be here with you. This might take us 100 of these because every single time something new is on us. So we had just a general talk about healing, and then last week we went into healing your boundaries. And this time we're going into healing your thoughts. If there's one thing that I realized as I grew up is that thoughts are about as loud as anything. It's like somebody talking. So that's what we're going to be talking about this episode. Sit back, relax. We're going to be sipping. If you're sipping, I don't know about you, but sit back, relax, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation.
Ah.
Yeah, girl. Thoughts. This one was massive when I thought about it. As pun intended, thought about it. So maybe we can just kick it off with maybe talking about why our thoughts matter. Why are we even supposed to be thinking about what we think about, you know?
To be honest, this one I'm not gonna lie. This is the one that I have to say. I cannot say I have an answer
Mm-hmm.
because I'm still dealing with that, with my
Yes.
thought patterns. I didn't realize how bad it was
Mm-hmm.
until certain things made me have to sit down and really be like, oh, why are you like, when you realize something? Because, okay, this is what I was saying. Growing up, because I was disappointed a lot
Mm-hmm.
by like caregivers. My story, you know my story. I always had this thing where I started having to be like, let's in every scenario, it was always like let's look at the good side and let's look at what the worst could happen.
Right.
I started doing that with my life. In every situation I would always also think of the worst thing that could happen.
Right. We live in worst case scenarios.
Yeah, and then it's like I was doing that to prepare myself. Like if anything is ever to go wrong, at least I already thought about it. So when it happens, it's just gonna be like, well, at least I mean, it's actually not as bad as I thought,
Yeah.
but it's still. It was a thing until I started to realize that's actually unhealthy.
Right.
And then from there, I started to realize it changed from that to actually, because I've also gone through certain things, I've also gone through certain traumas, I've experienced so many things that it now became, there was no longer that option for positive side no more. It was now just legit negative.
Yeah.
And you would sit in a whirlwind for a good 15 minutes, zoned out, and then you come out of it and you're like, oh my God,
What was I thinking about?
what the heck?
Yeah.
And then also having to realize that it's important, your thoughts are important because what you continuously dwell in manifests in reality.
Oh, yeah.
And not
Yeah.
only that, if you're a Christian, we talk about your mind because your mind is connected to your heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know how they always talk about it, like it's what I might do this the opposite, but it starts from your mind to your heart and then to your mouth.
Yes, because out of the abundance of the heart,
Also, is it
the
heart
mouth
and mind?
speaks. But I think it's the mind. It'll get into the heart and out of the mouth. I think you're right. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
that's when they always say, like, even when it comes to sin, it doesn't mean you sin by saying. It starts by in your head.
In
If
your
you've already
head.
thought about it, even if you don't say it, you've thought about it.
It's so funny that you're talking about on the Christian side of things because I've heard that scripture, as a man thinketh, so is he.
So is he.
So many times. Like I've been in church my whole life. I used to think about it. And then one day, I think I heard a sermon. Somebody talked about that scripture where Jesus is with his disciples and they were walking and they were hungry and there was a fig tree, right? And then this fig tree didn't have any fruit. And so Jesus cursed this thing and it curled up and died, right? He was in his like, I'm a G today. He was not playing with
It
it.
didn't produce fruit.
It didn't produce fruit, right? And then somebody tied that fruit, saying that the fruit in your life is basically what you portray, right? And if we take it into the word thing that we're talking about, it's the things that come out of my mouth, it's the way that I conduct myself, what I say, how I paint pictures, all of the things me that is external that you're seeing, right? We can call that the fruit. But what is the seed that you're planting for it to grow into fruit was your thoughts. That blew my mind. And I was like, wait a minute. That means everything that I'm looking at that I don't like, I planted that seed, right? And it's usually something dark. And that's how I knew, like last year when I started trying to shift my life around to get to something better, I could be home in broad daylight, light, sunshine flooding in, and it just feels dark. It's in the middle of the day, it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and it just feels dark. That's when I started realizing, wait, there must be something to do with the thoughts. Like you're saying, it starts from somewhere, because honestly, if it's 12 o'clock, sun's shining, everything is good, there's no reason why I should feel like I'm in a dark place. And those thoughts will keep you there. Like you said, 15 minutes zoning out, thinking about worst case scenarios, from an email about, hey, maybe you can correct this on a work email, to like, oh my goodness, I'm about to get myself fired. This is terrible. I'm a terrible person at my job, and this and this and this. And it's like, how did
And then it goes from your thoughts to anxiety, from anxiety
Yeah.
to depression.
And now you can't even show up at work the way that you're supposed to, because you're in this funk. And what was just meant to be a cautionary, hey, you could adjust this, it starts to manifest, because now you can't even work properly because you're in this depressive state. And that thing that you thought about what's going to happen happens. Now you think, oh my goodness, you see, this is what happens, this is what happens. But you literally triggered it all the way from the beginning. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
No, thoughts are powerful.
Thoughts are
And
really
that's
powerful.
one thing I have to say. Your mind is a very, very delicate but powerful muscle
Mm-hmm.
that you have. And if you feed it good, you produce good. If you fill it with darkness, darkness literally will come out of it. Everything you do, everything you say, everything that surrounds you is literally the fruit of your mind. Because I'm not gonna lie, I feel like it's harder to be in a state of a negative mindset, but still wake up and everything physically, you're trying to do the positive aspect, even though your mind is having a fight. That's why you end up seeing other people, how they end up having addictions and different things.
Yeah.
Either it's drinking, either it's going out excessively, because your mind, you're trying to destruct your mind.
You're trying to silence those voices,
Those
because
voices.
our thoughts are loud.
Oh, they're loud.
They
That
are
little
so
that
loud.
little voice in your head.
I swear it's like another person.
Actually, it's not even a little voice, because it's really loud.
Megaphone. Mm-hmm.
And
Complete.
it was so interesting, because speaking of voices, there was a sermon that Jerry Flowers did, and he gave an example of how the voices in our head.
I think I know that one. Is that the one with the beatbox?
Yes.
Mm.
And yeah, I will be mixing scripture
I know
and
that one.
spiritual.
We're gonna find that link. We'll put it in the comments, because
but
you guys should watch
pretty
that.
much he gave the example he gave, or how he explained it, is legit how it is. And it was like God would be trying to talk to you, and it was like, God, talk to me, God, talk to me.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I used to be frustrated about when I would hear sermons. I would hear people saying, God talks to you all the time. I'm like, how? Or even people like, God talked to me and he said, I'm like, how did God talk to you? Like, is his voice, do you hear him
What
saying,
does it sound like? Gravity?
Rufaro? Like, how do you hear his voice? And
What
I
was he saying?
it used to aggravate me, because I'm like, so where am I in my spiritual journey? Like, God, do you just talk to certain people? Like, what's
up? Is there a club that I didn't know? Something's up.
Like, what makes me be able to hear your voice?
Yeah.
And then people are like, God talks to everybody, but it's just a matter of you being able to hear his voice, because God's voice is soft.
Yeah. Oh, it is soft.
It's not loud. It's soft. And Jerry Flowers gives example where he's playing like the boombox, right? And it's so loud. And then Jerry Flowers is pretty much saying, this is God. He was speaking. I was like, this is how God is speaking. And he was speaking, but this music was so loud
You couldn't hear him.
that you couldn't hear him. But he was speaking. And it was like, this is how it is. This is your thoughts. Your thoughts are so loud that you do not hear
That message was so good. Yeah.
God speaking to you. But before we even start talking about God speaking to us, most of us, we actually do not know what our actual voice is in our head. We have so many
Ooh.
voices. We have voices of our upbringing. What was said to us when we were
Oh,
young?
girl. Take
What
it
was
there.
said? What was said to us by friends? What was said to us at school? What was said to us at work?
We don't know what our
We don't know
real
our
voice.
real voice is.
Girl, you just blew my mind. Okay, take me down there. Okay, well, okay. Let's keep going. Keep going.
But no, for real though, because I've had moments where I sit there and then I'm like, okay, which one was God's voice? Which one was my actual own voice? And which one was a voice of trauma, a voice of unhealed trauma, a voice of other people?
Girl, that's just, you know what? That's just made me realize something. I was reading, again, I'm still on that 2A Roberts book, Balance. He talked about that. He talked about how,
I need to read this book. I
girl,
have so many books that I need to read that I haven't read. I
that
haven't
book
read.
blows my mind. He was basically talking about how we are a body, right? We have a spirit and we have a soul. And he says self awareness is different from soul awareness. Soul awareness is the real you. That is the authentic, God ordained, powerful, authentic version of yourself. But because we've got all these other things that you've just talked about, we've got our parents' voices, societies, cultures, all of the negative, all of those things, we don't even know what our real voice sounds like. The real Hilda, not the one who's been through all of, I mean, literally the one who was when God was sitting there designing your life and he was adding all the sugar, all the spice, he was adding all this and saying this. The one who can actually handle what God has for you, we don't know what they sound like. Girl, I'm sitting here asking, do I even know what my authentic voice sounds like?
You know, I feel like it's 11:11.
Oh, is it?
It is. Make a wish. But you know, I've been sitting in that for a while. I've been, you know how I always tell you that there's a verse in the Bible like that freaks me out,
Mm-hmm.
and that's that verse where
Oh, God, I got chills already.
that verse that talks about pretty much like I can't really tell the story, but when that's the one with the virgins, right? With the
Yes, with the 10 lamps and
10
the
lamps,
yeah.
and then they had to gather their oil.
Yeah.
So they were waiting on God, Jesus, to pass through. But then the other two, there's two, right? Is it three? I don't know. The other two, please, if I did quote the Bible wrong, I'm sorry. But there were two who didn't have the oil. They waited. They didn't do what the other virgins did. So because they had the lamps on the whole time, when Jesus walked past, they ran out. So then the other virgins were like, you can go and get some oil, but we cannot give you ours.
Right.
Because we still want to be able to use it. So they went in the room with Jesus. And then these two, when they came back and they were like, Jesus, open up, it's us. He was like, I do not know you.
I think it might be 5 virgins, but we'll clarify that.
I don't remember the story, but I just thought that he said, I do not know you. And then, it's mentioned again in the Bible where it says, like, you don't want a situation where you call me Lord, Lord, but I do not know you. Because what you said, he created us to be a certain way.
Right.
But because of our upbringing, our trauma and things that have happened to us, now we're not who he called us to be. And that's one thing that I always say, like, that verse gives me the chills, because every day when I wake up, I'm always like, at the end of this.
Yeah. I'm going to have to face him.
I want to know, like, I don't want him to be like, who are you?
And the thing about it is how to know that you're going to get there and he's not going to tell you that is building a life according to what you're supposed to be doing it. And those building blocks are those very thoughts. Because, girl, those voices are translated into thoughts to me. Those voices translate themselves into thoughts, right? So the original you, the authentic Hilda, has a voice. And these other ones that are competing for attention, they also have voices which translate into thoughts. But what I'm noticing is that those other ones are loud, right? Like we just said, they make the most noise. I don't know if it was it a message that we watched? Because we talk about all these things all the time. It was talking about how when you are the purpose of the enemy, for example, is to throw things at you, right? To make all this noise and have this constant whirlwind around you, and then to confuse you, so that now you don't know which one am I supposed to be listening to, right? Or which, especially when you're trying to make a decision, especially a destiny decision, right? He's
Mm.
throwing all these things at you, and it's messing around with you, and you've got fear over here, and trauma over here, and background over here, and lack of belief in who you could actually be. Everything's making all this noise, but in that whirlwind is that one voice, right? Which is the authentic you, that thought that came straight from God
It's
is
a
in
soft
there,
voice.
but it's softer.
That's God.
And if you get sidetracked and distracted, which is the plan of the enemy, right? Remember we were talking about how sometimes we'll get to the end of the day and it's like, girl, I was literally fighting to survive today. And I feel like I've lost the day. And it was like, isn't that the plan of the enemy? Is to, if I get you to lose half an hour, get half a day, keep you distracted and in a stupor for as long as I can, he's won, because that's more time that you're out of your purpose, which means you're out more time that you're not reaching the people that you're supposed to and doing what you're supposed to be doing. But that little voice is the one that's going to tell you what to do. So he keeps you distracted. And like we talked about in the last episode, sometimes the only way to hear that is to just you yourself go quiet.
Ooh, that one is the hardest though.
Girl.
That's the hardest. One thing that I've also learned, you cannot seek God and also be in your head.
Yeah.
The battle that you fight, I'm fighting it every day.
I got to tell you, yesterday I was fresh off of that battle. In fact, this week was a really tough week with that. This week was unnecessarily
Ooh.
tough. I feel like we're coming out of this like I was like chewed out and then spit back out and taken back in and chewed out again. That battle of the thoughts was so savage. If there's a time where that imposter syndrome hit me hard, was this past week. And it's like, and it's like loud. You wake up in the morning and the first thing is like, you're getting into work and all of this, or you really think you're going to make this through. The next email that comes is going to be like something wrong with the work that you did, or doing something for the business. Oh, really? Oh, why you out of everybody? You're going to be the first person in your family to actually do something on this kind of a scale? Like, where are you going? And it's a constant. This is why that thing about the fig tree, that thing about when Jesus says, I do not know you, you got to break it down into little things. These thoughts that we allow to sit, this is why they're so important, because these thoughts are voices, and which one that you're listening to gets louder and louder, and then it literally dictates your life. That's how you get to depression and anxiety and all of these things, is this
Because
constant.
yesterday was it for me. From the moment I woke up,
Girl.
the moment I woke up, that whole day, I'm able to do my job and I'm able to be done by a specific time. But yesterday, I did my job even over the time I'm supposed to clock out of work.
Yeah, slow it down. It's like walking in quicksand all day.
And I was just like, what is this? And one thing about the one thing that I've been talking about with Rufaro is like, growing up, I've had to suck up a lot. I was never that kid that cried.
Yeah, girl.
I was never that kid that cried. I never, like,
Strong girl.
guys, when I tell
Gangsta.
y'all, I was labeled the kid that probably doesn't have emotions
Mhm.
because, and that's also one thing that I'm also learning. It was unhealthy, but
Mhm.
because I had to,
Shut
once
it down.
again, not being able to express myself, not being able to speak up, not being able to do certain things, I knew like if something hurt me, I couldn't show that. If anything, I probably would be sitting alone. Then tears would just roll down. If I was angry because I couldn't express it, it used to come out in tears.
Right.
And it's still something that even in adulthood, same thing. If I'm hurt, but because I've experienced so much hurt, I've had to hold in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And now that I'm going through this unhealing and going to therapy and having people tell me certain things,
Mhm.
that I have to sit down and actually analyze that. And actually, because
acknowledge.
I've been reading, I've been listening to like a lot of podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of like Jerry Flowers, Mike Todd,
Mhm.
Sarah Jakes, and how they talk about this inner child, which is a
Mhm.
topic that I feel like we also need to talk about. Because not only do we have to think about our thoughts, but also our thoughts have to deal with the little child in
Yeah.
us.
Oh yeah.
But guys, in
So what
my
happened
big
yesterday?
age, I literally have had so many moments where I cry and I'm like,
This is not me.
why am I crying? I'm a girl who like my grandfather, my mom's dad, like that was bestie.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away and I walked past his coffin. I saw him. I didn't cry.
Mm-hmm.
That to now sitting, I wake up and I'm just having tears from thoughts.
That's actually just made me realize that the thoughts, some of the thoughts that we actually have to go through, which are also quiet, is that unhealed little girl or a little boy that needed to express something and was never able to. And it's quiet, but it's uncomfortable. That's why we never want to give him or her attention. That little girl that had to walk past your granddad's coffin and didn't have a chance to grieve still needs to grieve. It's not like the energy disappears. It just morphed it into something else. And that's another reason why it's okay why we want to be distracted all the time, because who wants to deal with that issue?
Nobody.
I don't want to deal with the loss of somebody that I really loved and that had to go, especially when you're the one who always has to be strong and you're the one who always has to be in this thing, right? That like I'm a warrior type situation. I don't cry. But crying is not a sign of weakness. I had to learn this when I got older.
And it's so crazy because, one thing that is we're speaking about this, I'm also realizing because I had to grow up at a very young age. I wasn't around my parents a lot. So I was always in different situations, always having to adjust. That it got to that point where, you know how like when you hear like guys talk and they're like, we're told like expressing emotions
makes you weak.
And you know how like I was telling you, even growing up, I was a tomboy. I got along more with guys than girls.
Mm-hmm.
And now as we're speaking, I'm also wondering if the reason I got along with guys was because we kind of had the same mindset. Like with that whole, you don't express feelings, you have to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be the one that takes up all this. You're pretty much like a parent. So I got along with girls because girls like used to be like what they talked about. I didn't relate to it. Like when they talked about dolls and if they cried, I even up to now, like it has taken a lot of things for me to even get to that point where I'm also getting in touch with the feminine side of me.
Mm-hmm.
And also having, once again, someone mentioning like, why do you always have to feel like you have to be like
this
that?
tough girl
Like
all the time.
And why can like it's okay to express emotions. And that's why I've also noticed that I really get along with guys and I'm able to understand, actually not even guys, I'm able to understand people because of the pain that I've had to go through.
Yeah.
And I'm able to look at people and not be judgmental, and I'm able to look at people and actually be like, yo, I understand you more than you think I do.
Yeah, I really do get it.
But when it comes to guys, I've always connected with them. But now as we're speaking, I'm realizing the reason that it's like that is because of the same thing. Is the upbringing, the mentality that I've had to have was I can't cry, I can't show emotion, I have to suck it up and I just have to move.
And there's another thought that you had for such a long time.
And that's a thought that I've had for so much. So now it's like I'm going through that thing, the, certain patterns that I'm having to unlearn, behaviors that I'm having to unlearn.
Yeah.
So in that whole unlearning, it's also, I think, is those tears of realizing that for a long time, you've lived a life that is actually not true.
Yeah. It wasn't even the real you showing up every day. It was just a response to trauma.
This time you've been living in a survival mode. Everything has always been survival.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you've had to do has been survival, just so that I make it. I don't know what's the end of this, but I gotta make it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what they want from me, even though I don't want to do it. Let me just do it, because if I don't do, then who?
Yeah.
But then you start to realize that as you get older, you're like, but who's taking care of you? Mm-hmm. Who's caring about you? And then you realize how much nobody is taking care about you. Nobody even cares, but you're always the one who's always caring for everybody. You're always the one who's always having those people that have voices instilled in your head are the same people in reality don't really give up.
And then that makes me wonder, like, now why it's so important to go back to those childhood thoughts, to the beginning of those thoughts, because you got to actually interrogate your thoughts. I saw this thing one time on TikTok. It was that somebody was literally interrogating their thoughts. They were like, you got to sit down. I want to know where you came from and who sent you. And that was for me, I was like, wow, that's really true. Like, if I'm going to have this thought that says, you're out here and you're on your own, who told me that? Like, who planted that seed in my head? Because that's what then triggered the hyper independence. That's what then triggered all these other actions that you've done because of that thought that sat and became a reality, that I'm on my own. And yet, the more that we get into the word will always tell us that you're never alone. I'm always there. And especially when you're walking like that with God, God never sends you out by yourself. All the way from Adam, he had to give him Eve, all the animals in the ark were 2 by 2, all the way down to Paul.
Always 2 by 2.
Yeah. Paul went down and he had Timothy, and Paul had, Barnabas, all these things that happened.
Even Moses, he
had Aaron. So it's always that thing that, like, who sent you that thought that says you're on your own when I'm not? There will be moments when I have to do things. Moses had to go up that mountain by himself for 40 days because he was the one who was given that task. But when he came back, Aaron was waiting for him. So there might be seasons where there are some sections you have to be alone. But you're not alone all the time. You might be alone of human company 24/7, or like there'll be moments with human company, but God's always with you. And who better to walk with you than him?
But that to thought be able to hear him
came from somewhere.
Yeah.
That's that interrogation of like, why do I even think like you're saying, like, you'd be wondering like how did, when I actually sit and think about myself, if I look at my whole day and I get to the end and I'm like drained and it's been one of those, I've pretty much hated every moment of this day. If I start to backtrack, what thoughts was I actually thinking? That's when you realize how negative they were. That's why you were in this continuous spiral.
You drained yourself.
You drained your own battery completely.
Drained your own self. Nobody did it but yourself. Nobody was with you.
Girl. And then this is what I've realized now. Thoughts lead us to expectations, right? So that thought of yours that said, I'm always by myself or nobody's going to come for me. Your expectation now, even when you meet people, it's like, well, this is going to be surface. Even if you're in my life and you go, I'm always I got to watch my own back. I got to do this for myself. Even in a relationship, and I used to do this, and I'm recovering from this. Even in that relationship, telling each other that we love each other and this is my person. In the back of my mind, I'm alone. Yeah. And if you want anything to be done, you got to do it yourself, and your burdens are your own. Nobody's coming for you. So it's on the surface, sounds great, all of that. But in my reality, I do things solo because people will let you down and people don't come through. And they'll come through for the fun part. But when it's something that you really, 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 really need and that's really crucial to you, people are going to let you down. That thought had to be interrogated because it gave me a false expectation. So now even in a relationship, I think I sent it to you the other day, something on TikTok, this girl was having a rant and she's like, I used to be the easy girl. I used to be the one that had no demands, and now she's like, F that, and I'm not like that. I am high maintenance. Exactly. Now I'm like, wait a minute. Why do I have that kind of a thought? I need to fix that because it changed my expectations. In fact, it so badly affected me that if I look back at the lineup of my exes, which is a scary thought, if you line up your exes and you think about the kind of person that they were, different names, different nationality, different race, and yet there was something very similar with them, but it wasn't them, it was me. I was reproducing the same character because of my expectations. So I dated, I'm careful about narcissistic after we talked about, but I dated self-centered and what's that word? My English don't fail me now. Self-centered and the kind of man who doesn't give but expects this way. Because I was always the one who has to give out and I never expected it back. My expectations are messed up. I dated the same person, which is why it cemented that thing in my head that this is what happens in relationships. And yet that was my expectation.
So then we can talk about your thoughts. Mm-hmm. They attract.
Oh God, that is such a scary thought. That really
what you think is
me.
What you attract.
Yeah. That's a scary, scary thought because that means it's my, I'm bringing this thing over and over again in my life.
Yeah. So what you think is what you attract. And then we go again to unhealed wounds, because your unhealed wounds will also attract people who have the same unhealed wounds. So it's like a mirror.
Yeah.
So if
Trauma bonding.
Yeah, trauma bonding. So now that's the whole thing of, because you're unhealed and your thoughts are already messed up, you don't have certain, like, I actually read this actually, where your unhealed wounds and how you think, it's a mirror.
Right.
So the partner that you date, even though you know how they're treating you, you're like, I'm not deserving of this, but you're able to deal with it because they're just projecting what you already think about yourself.
Right. Exactly.
So you're able to deal with that abuse because that's what you already think of yourself. So they're validating it back to you. And that's how you're able to tell if you're insecure, if you really love yourself.
Yeah.
It's the person that you're having to have a relationship with. Either it's your boyfriend or your friends. What they're reflecting is also a part of you that is unhealed.
I love that, because that basically means if you're gonna say, well, how do I know my thoughts are toxic, or how do I know that I'm not having good thoughts? If you take a look at the relationships around you, they're gonna give you a good idea of where your thoughts have taken you. Because as a man thinketh, so is he. So if you take a look at the kind of people that you have around you, they're just a reflection or a mirror, like you're saying, of what you've accepted as, this is what is good enough for me, and this is what is standard for me. So if you take a look around, and everybody and the kind of people that you're dating treats you like honest trash, and then you don't move from there, that's a really good boundary.
You also think that you are really not worthy.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to really sit. Because one thing that I can tell you, when I look at the people that I've dated, it's funny because everyone, for the most part, has been a Christian. But I've also realized, like, the more that I get stronger in God, the guy that I end up with is also, like, stronger in that aspect.
Girl.
But then there's always that other thing where it's like, when you're like, when you're looking at someone and you're just like, oh God, I don't know about that. Like, oh God. And you just, but because you also have this thing in you, that's like, I understand, because I also have my own faults. My life is not perfect. So I guess you're not perfect too. It's okay.
Girl, that evolution.
But it's just that when you actually now know your traumas, and some of them are highlighted through a relationship, God will literally be like, you know what, since you don't want to listen to me in your head, I'm going to bring relationships that will wake you up. And then when you're in that, then you're like, oh, that's actually the thought that I've had, but now it's in a person.
You know what, I actually think about that. Now that you're talking about when you get into a relationship and certain things are revealed that you didn't need, I had another thought about that. You know, when we get to the thing where you meet somebody and you guys are vibing and you're like, ooh, this, I think this is my guy, right? And you go back, good Christian girls as we are going to do the thing. God, I met him, but I need you to tell me, is this him? Father God, answer me, is this him, right? And God's like, no. And we're like, well, but I'm going to go see if I'm at, what are you talking about? He talks, he goes to church every Sunday, he does this, he does this, he does this, and off we go. We all know how that ends up. But maybe sometimes if we paid attention enough to that still small voice and purposefully looked for our authentic voice, it would make sense why God would say no. First of all, God will never keep you from something that's meant to be yours, right? But another thing is, God loves his children. He might recognize that this person is so unhealed, is so messed up, that they're going to drag you back the 15 steps you've just made on your road to recovery, right? And we're out here like, heck no, I think I can do this. I think I got it. And so this relationship will also highlight to you the areas that, as much as God would have said, I don't want you to go there, and you do go, they're also going to highlight the areas of your life where it's like, oh, wait, I was really weak in that one. And it took me coming out of the Christian bubble. And I honestly think, especially for those who are really getting into the things about God, we live in a Christian bubble. And sometimes we assume everybody's on the same wavelength and has the same kind of heart and has the same kind of thing. And just because you know, we go to church together for the last 7 years,
whole heart
doesn't mean that he's in here, right?
Yeah.
And when you get out of that, then you realize, oh, girl, if I walk out of this and I walk into something without God, I am left bruised, cut up, bloody, recovery season after recovery season. Jerry Fowler says that. And I'm a mess. But that voice, that thought, if we paid attention to that quiet voice, might even tell you, yeah, that's good, but you're not yet ready. Or flip it around, and you always tell me this. You might go mess up somebody else, right? You in your unhealed state and your crazy thought patterns and your negativity might go mess up somebody else who's on step number 25 on their recovery journey. And your crazy self is going to go and do something they're not
And
supposed to be doing.
sometimes, like, and I know sometimes we also do not know how toxic we are
Oh, yeah.
when we don't do that whole self-evaluation, when we don't also sit and really, one thing about me, in any situation, if there's a friendship or a relationship, I always take a step back to
Consider
realize
yourself.
what I also played a part in. I also sit to analyze my own. I analyze myself, and sometimes I actually feel like I overdo it because I'm my biggest critic. I am my biggest critic. But one thing about me is I never want. My goal in anyone that I have an interaction with is I want to make sure that even if our friendship or relationship doesn't work, I want you to at least be like, you know what? That person was kind to me.
Yeah.
They might be messed up, but I don't want to add
To your trauma.
to your trauma.
by
Pretty
my trauma.
much. Like, I don't want to add to your trauma, and I want you to actually see. I always want people to see that they're still good people.
Mm.
And one thing that I noticed is, like, because if you're also unhealed, sometimes you end up, like what you're saying, you end up making somebody worse. And it's not even intentional.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
because you don't know your parts, so you don't know how to do better to other
Yeah.
people, but you end up hurting the people that you love
Yeah.
by not healing yourself, by not knowing your full self. You
Mhm.
end up healing someone that you actually value. Or sometimes it gets to that point where even in wanting to do better, in wanting to fix things because you've messed up and now you want to fix it, you're actually making it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's sometimes I think about the unhealed version of you is like the 4-year-old trying to be a surgeon. And you put on the coat and everything and the stethoscope and put the tools out. But when you get in there, you literally can murder someone and you're not yet ready. That's the unhealed version. The healed version of you is grown up and taken time to study and failed, because you're going to have to fail a couple of times to know. Then you get to that point where if you hand me that relationship, I'll know what to do with it. And if you hand me that calling, if you hand me that thing, I now know what to do with it. Because if you trace back in the Bible, when God called you, doesn't mean that that's when he actually put you into office. He told David when he was young, you're going to become king. Yet Saul was still in position. David knew enough that I've been called, and I've been anointed, but it wasn't his time yet. He had to go through the process and the pain of having Saul trying to kill him. And it took him a while before he actually sat on that throne, Same thing with Peter. And I've been in Acts lately. So even after he had his Damascus Road experience and he was like from Saul to Paul, he had to go through that moment of being blind for 3 days and all of these other things before he walked into that, even though he heard God on that road. That growing up process is what takes you from that unhealed version to the healed one. Now you can handle relationships. Now you can do this a little bit better because you've grown up a little bit. And the thoughts are the things that are going to help you on that journey to get there. And one thing that I discovered about when you realize, okay, I've got all these thoughts and I'm constantly in my spiral, what do I do with it? I had to change what my ears were feeding on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to change that. I had to like almost rip up that tape and start to plug something new so that I had something new to feed off of, because I was always feeding off of. And the funny thing about it, binge watching Netflix and Hulu and things like that just increases the volume of those crazy things, because you're not feeding on anything healthy, mind you, you're turning into a vegetable. So when I said, I have to start feeding on something different to interrupt this pattern. So girl, on average, I'll listen to a message in the morning when I'm still getting myself ready, a full-on message, and I'm going to have one at night. And then I'm going to do my devotional in the morning. I'm trying to do it at night at the same time. I want to read a chapter of something, of a particular book every day. Do I get it right all the time? Nah.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, I'm just lazy. But the more I did it, the more I was able to identify those loud thoughts, which were so loud, but for some reason I kept leaving them there, was when I started to interrupt that pattern and giving myself something else to think about, right? Give myself something better to focus on. And instead of, and from doing something, put in an audiobook of something, but interrupt those horrible thoughts that I've heard and replace them. That thing that's like, girl, who do you think you are doing something like, girl, if I tell you the thoughts I've had even about this podcast, I have to replace that with like, but you have been called and you don't qualify yourself. God will qualify you. And he's known the plans he's had for me from the beginning. Something that he told me to do. This, I kept hearing this in one of my devotional times, was eyes closed, hands off. And it was like, for this particular season, eyes closed and hands off. So stop looking at what you think you know, what you think you have in your little bag of like accomplishments, and then hands off the wheel, because you're always trying to steer it, right? Oh, I heard that might be a good job. Let me run over there. Okay, everybody else is doing this. Let me run over there. It's like eyes closed and hands off. And girl, that process, but that fight of the thought, every day.
Every day, every moment, every
Every
second.
day.
And one thing that I've realized, sometimes it gets to that point where, like, how you said you listen to stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even listening to stuff, that voice is actually louder than what I'm listening to. And it actually
Yeah.
becomes irritating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, now I'm irritated, not only by what I'm hearing, because now I can't even hear it because my voice is loud. The one thing that has been working for me lately,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it works for anybody. Now I literally will go in my prayer closet and I'll kneel down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, God, at this point, I'm not faking it with you because you already know what I'm about to say before I say it. But right now,
You
these
know.
thoughts that I'm having, these are the thoughts that I'm having. And I start mentioning everything that I'm having.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing I was telling you, that I start crying and I'm like, where are these tears coming from?
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, when I leave and I come back to sit, sometimes it works, like I'm good.
Yeah.
It's like that little voice.
Mm-hmm.
That little voice will say a statement in my head. These thoughts, like, even sometimes it'll be like, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Or it'll be like, you're going to be okay. Or it's something that reminds me, like, of other good stuff that is happening, even though
Yeah.
this one area is falling apart. But it's like, but look at these other
Yeah.
things that are good,
Or
though.
just look at how far you've come.
Yeah. And something could be just look how far you have come.
Yeah.
Or it could be just like, but look at what you're doing to be better
Mhm.
for you right now. It's a simple thing that it just having that
can
wusa
interrupt
moment,
that
like having
cycle.
just a moment of just like, let me be quiet, like silence sometimes. And I know, like, some people, because it's hard.
Yeah.
That's why some people need distractions. That's why they need people around them all the time, because they don't know how to literally sit with themselves
And be quiet.
and just deal with thoughts. But thoughts are really powerful. They literally could make or destroy you.
Because if they can destroy a whole day and take a whole season and take away everything in your life, it means that on the opposite, they can literally build. You can come out of that place, because if thoughts got you in, thoughts can get you out.
And
It's just paying attention and learning how to wait. I just had that thought that told me counteract it over and over and over again. And to be the bearers of bad news. Listen, you don't ever get to the point where I've graduated.
nah,
I know they're good.
it's a constant
It's
battle.
ongoing.
And sometimes really being in your head will ruin a lot. It ruins relationships. I
Yeah.
can attest to that. Like, being in my head ruined relationships. And it also ruins you showing up as your authentic self,
Yeah.
always having to think about that stuff. And it's really important to get to a point where you are able to tell people, you have to be surrounded by people you can be honest with, and they're able to also accept you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can be surrounded by people that, you think that they care, and then you express the thoughts that you have. But if they're also not fully healed, they can also start coming for you. That
Yeah.
the whole
That
unhealed,
cycle that we talked about.
yeah, the whole unhealed boundary. Now you express your, like, hey, it's like me saying, hey, Rufaro, like, I'm not gonna lie, but I struggle with thoughts, like, sometimes in our friendship, like, I don't know why, but when you do this and that, my mind goes to this place. And I
Right.
tell you in an open space where we're
Yeah.
comfortable. But then later on, down the line, if I trigger you with something, then you bring out this moment that I told you about, that thought. And then now you're like, yeah, that's why you're in your head, because of that thought that you have. And then you start like you start
jabbing
jabbing because of your own boundary, but you're
Yeah.
not realizing that what I said was me not even trying to get at you, but because you're not healed, because probably in your childhood you always had people blaming you for stuff
exactly.
that you
was
didn't
your
do.
fault. Mm-hmm.
Now now even other people that are also trying to love you, and they're also seeing that we relate, but because you're not healed, now you're struggling. Now you're like, dang, I told you my thought, and now you're saying this, and you're telling me that I'm this, like I need therapy, I need healing, or I'm messed up, and or you're crazy. This is the person that you love, and they're telling you that. Then now you switch it, and you're like, damn. So am I really that crazy?
This is why when we first started this whole healing journey topic, we discovered that there are so many things that are affected if you don't get on this journey of healing. It's you, it's everybody around you, it's everybody that you're going to be connected with, it's in your future children. And taking the moment to do this as an actual journey is an honor to yourself, and it's an honor to those that you actually will love, because it doesn't matter how much I feel that I love you, but if I'm coming in my unhealed state, I'm going to lacerate you while I lacerate myself. And that's why there's so many different areas of this stuff. I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel like we've literally just begun, because we've just talked about healing from boundaries and healing from thoughts. There, you want to stay in for next time's episode, because we've got so many coming through for you.
It's always healing about different things.
Healing
Thoughts,
about different things.
childhood, family, healing from disappointment. And I even feel like you also need to talk about healing when you think you heard God's voice, but
it wasn't it.
But was not it?
I am guilty of that question many times. I've said, God, but I heard you. Did I? Or he's in the middle of it. Because I think many times when he would have said, again, the story of Moses, when he's like, come forth out of Egypt, I'm going to set you free. And they get out of there and they get to the Red Sea, and it's like, God, I swear I heard you say that you've set us free. I know
and
I heard you.
And then like, when they're outside of Egypt, right? And then now Pharaoh is
Pharaoh's behind them.
And then now the people are looking at him, they're like, so you're telling us that you made us pull up over here for us to die here in the desert.
I know.
We could have just died.
And at that moment, he goes, I like the way this one pastor says, he went burned and he said, God, and he's like, your people. And he was like, why are you coming to me? I told you to go forward. And he's like, God, are you looking at what I'm looking at? Girl, we need to talk about it, because many times I feel like I've been in that position. But as always, guys, I hope this was a good episode for you. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Tell us what you think. Tell us your stories. Tell us how it's been for you guys, because we never run out of these stories. And as always, from Hilda and I to you, if we can make it, so can you.
Peace out.